The honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard the honourable member mention that they had 2 murders in Barrie and 36 deaths through fentanyl and opioids. I would submit that you've had 38 murders.
A week ago, I had the opportunity to stand in this House and to request an emergency debate on the opioid crisis because it wasn't just affecting one province anymore. It's been spreading across this country from large urban municipalities into medium and smaller municipalities, even rural municipalities, Mr. Speaker, as I know you know with the issues we've seen in Simcoe, Muskoka. But that debate was turned down. It was said, no, we do not need an emergency debate. This is not something that the House needed to spend time on at that point. Well, I'm very glad that the House leaders have worked together and provided for this opportunity here tonight.
Hear, hear.
And I'll say this, I do not believe that this is a partisan issue. I think that no matter what happens, no matter where people are coming from, everyone agrees that Canadians want to see movement on this issue, and movement means less Canadians dying each and every year. Governments have a problem at putting measurables in place to ensure that their plans and strategies are working. And if we're going to put measurables in place on the opioid crisis, it needs to be reducing the number of Canadians who are dying each and every year from this crisis to the point where we're able to say that we've made headway. Now, this has obviously come on the backs of some devastating news back in Barrie. We've seen 36 deaths in 2017 related to this crisis. We've seen over and over again the different problems socioeconomic contribute to what is now an out-of-control crisis that started with simple opioids and has now expanded to include fentanyl and others hitting the street, and carfentanil, quite frankly, hitting the street in Barrie. Now, the different newspapers, national newspapers, have been coming to our region and have been writing about it. They say the Simcoe-Muskoka area of Ontario has been devastated by powerful opioids like illicit fentanyl and carfentanil, where the overdose rate is significantly higher than the provincial average. They talk about how individuals are getting incarcerated for moving these substances. A 21-year-old Barrie man is serving a 7-year sentence after pleading guilty to importing fentanyl in 2016. And they say, to put it bluntly, people are dying. Until his arrest, and I won't say the individual's name, he was an unabashed importer and peddler of a variety of drugs, including, most significantly, fentanyl. The Globe and Mail said the opioid crisis hit Barrie, Ontario with a painful shock. They say the city has struggled for years with pockets of poverty, with its soup kitchens, methadone clinic, men's shelters. The downtown is a gathering place for the homeless, the mentally ill, and the recently incarcerated, populations that tend to be vulnerable to drug addiction. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that whatever the strategy is or isn't that the government has been putting forward, it's not working. And I'm not saying that to be a judge of the past performance, but I'm saying that to request the government actually step up and put a strategy in place. When the health minister was asked, well, what about the Portugal model? It seems to have worked. The response was, well, look, it's going to be essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, it's essentially not my job to get everybody else in order on this. But it is, because this is not a provincial crisis. This is a national crisis that is spreading from province to province. And if the federal government didn't believe that they had responsibility to deal with this, they wouldn't have created safe consumption sites that they themselves are funding. So you can't have it both ways. The federal government can't say, look, it's not our problem, we're just going to hand some money to the provinces, and then say, actually, it is our problem, and we're going to fund these over here. They need to have a strategy. They need to work with health ministers across the country, and it needs to be delivered in unison, in uniformity. It's just not happening. We've seen safe consumption sites, safe injection sites, what I call illegal drug injection sites, going up across the country. And this has been happening now for years, albeit. But over those same years, the number of deaths is severely increasing. A 40% increase between 16 and 17. In Simcoe, Muskoka, 81 deaths. In Barrie, 36, 150,000 people, 36 deaths. Described in one newspaper as a city, it would be unusual to have 2 homicides in 1 year. Yet 36 deaths from opioid-related addictions or consumption. It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. And what's more devastating is our government is not meeting the call. And I don't pretend to stand here and say that the New Democrats and the Conservatives will agree on every piece of this, and the Liberals as well. But I don't think there's anyone in this chamber that can honestly stand up and say the strategy that's being used right now is working. It's not. We need to ensure that there is a comprehensive strategy that can help these people every step of the way. And sometimes it's a one-time use results in a death. Sometimes it's an addiction. Sometimes it's laced in marijuana or crack. Fentanyl is something that is being added because it's so cheap to improve or, quote, improve the high. That's just resulted in so many deaths and so many circumstances. But we haven't had a clear strategy, whether it's at border security or to help those who are actually fighting addictions. I've had the opportunity to visit the Works, to visit the Moss Park, to visit Insight in the area around Insight in downtown Vancouver. And I can tell you what I've seen is something that I do not want to see in Canada. People who have been left behind by the system, some of it socioeconomic, some of it homelessness, some of it trauma, but people are being left behind, and they're being left behind by this government. The reality is that we can do more. If you can tweet $50 million out on a Saturday night to somebody in another country because they're a celebrity, then damn it, you can help people who are Canadians, who have been living in this country forever, who have contributed to the tax system. We can put the funding in place to ensure the help is there. And we will not save everybody. But we will do a heck of a lot better than we are doing right now. It is not being good enough. And Mr. Speaker, I'm a conservative. I am a fiscal conservative. I fight for low taxes. I fight for efficient use of our tax dollars. And I can tell you I have not met a Canadian who said providing more rehabilitation, more recovery services, providing more support and more help for individuals who are fighting these addictions is a bad thing. We know it's a good thing because it helps the individual, because it actually helps society, and because it's the right thing to do. So you might ask, how do I know that these individuals are being left behind? When the federal government, who's claiming they don't have a responsibility here, it's actually the provinces, but we're doing everything at the same time, which is a very strange approach to what's being communicated here by the health minister. When the health minister says we've created 25 new injection sites and only 25 beds in British Columbia that has seen over half of the deaths related to the opioid crisis, we are failing. People are being left behind. When we put, as a government, $1 million into a vending machine to provide opiates and only 25 beds are created, we are failing. When we have failed to work with pharmacists who can be gatekeepers on this issue, who can ensure when they see a prescription that is either too great in terms of the quantity of the opiate or too great in terms of the quantity of the number of pills being prescribed, when we fail to work with pharmacists who have to see each and every time the individual who has received that prescription, we are leaving people behind, and we are leaving the gate open for more people to become addicted. When the health minister says that the federal government's but one actor in the response, that's pretty much saying we're failing. When we look at what we're doing and we fail to take responsibility, we are failing. So I know we won't answer or create all of the solutions here tonight, but I hope through this debate that the government will actually take note and change its path and put the funding where it needs to go. And I guarantee that we can make headway on this issue. And I hope that everyone in this House will work together moving forward to ensure that we leave no more Canadians behind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.